So remember, it's a transportation question. So transportation question, you're supposed to always start by checking for balance. Is our table balanced? We can only say that our table is balanced if supply equals demand. So in this particular case, if you look at our total supply from our factories, it's 200. Our total consumption, our total demand from our warehouses is 200. So the two are the same, and therefore we need to conclude straight away that our problem or a table here is balanced. And if it is balanced, then we shall not have any need. We shall not have any need for what here? Introduction of a dummy. No dummy introduction. Now, after that, what do? We'll come and put our transportation structure. In the transportation structure, we shall be having two types of cells. We shall be having the big cell and the small cell. The big cell, of course, will be taking the quantity. The big cell will be taking the quantities, whereas the small cell, we shall be putting what we call the transportation cost per unit. Transportation cost, it's not lost on us that always here we must have sources, of which we have our three factories, factory A, B, and C. And then on this other axis, where are we taking these goods to? We are taking them to our destinations. So our destinations here are warehouse 1, warehouse 2, and warehouse 3. And then we have said that these small cells will be carrying the transportation cost per unit, which have been given on this table here, which have been given on this table. If you look at this table, we have A to warehouse 1, 20, 14, 16. And then we have 30, 24, 18, 30, 24, 18. So we have here 30, 24 versus 18. And then the last row from factory C, what are the transportation costs from factory C? The transportation cost, ladies and gentlemen, from C, what do we have here? 14, 16, 24. So we have here 14, 16 versus what here? 24. Now, ladies and gentlemen, remember that on this particular axis, we normally put the supply there. On this axis, we normally put the supply. On this axis, we normally put the supply vis-a-vis what here? Demand down here. Here, down here, we have demand. So there we have supply, total supply from our sources. They move that way. We'll be able to get our total supply. And then, of course, our warehouses will be able to match them with our demands. So if you look at our question, they have given us the supply, this capacity. So capacity, we have A giving us 90. A will give us 90. Remember, my figures are in terms of thousands of units. So A will give us 90. B supply is 30. C supply is 80. So we have 90, 30, and what here? 80. And then we have warehouse 1 demand is 50. Warehouse 1 demand is 50. We have warehouse 2 is 110. Warehouse 2 is 110. Warehouse 3 is 40, like that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we happen to be having our table there. We happen to be having our demand as given in the question. Warehouse 1 wants 50, warehouse 2 110, warehouse 3 40, etc. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with this kind of information, now I can very easily slot in the quantities inside here. So you want to do distribution of the quantities that I devised them. Warehouse 1 should get how many from source B, for example, etc. So from there, the next step, come and distribute. So we have here distribute. You are distributing, distribute units to the big cells. Distribute units to the big cells. Remember, in QA distribution of units to the big cells, we always use what we call the Vogel's approximation method. So we always use the Vogel's approximation, Vogel's approximation method. So Vogel's approximation method. Vogel's approximation method. Vogel's approximation method. Vogel's approximation method. Now, if you can remember, this model that you are calling the Vogel's or Vogels is a method that makes use of penalties. So whenever we talk of Vogel's approximation method, remember that it is a penalties method. Vogel's approximation method is a penalties method. It is a penalties method. And as such, we shall come here and compute penalties. We shall come here and compute penalties. So come here and compute for us the penalties. So we have here penalties versus penalties for this particular row versus penalties for this particular row. So penalties, we calculate penalties for the sources versus penalties for the destinations. But how do we get these penalties? How do we get the penalties? To get penalties, ladies and gentlemen, we shall go to each row, selecting two very best cells. Each row selecting two very best cells. Two very best cells. Now, ladies and gentlemen, listen. In row number 1, which one is the best cell cost-wise? Remember, these are costs. So cost-wise, we shall always endeavor to minimize cost. And as such, we shall always pick the cheapest cell. If you look at this thing very keenly, the cheapest cell here is this one here with 14 in row 1. In row 1, 14 is the cheapest cell, followed by which one here, somebody? 16. So for us to get a penalty, we always work with the two cells along a row. So these two cells along a row, once you have identified the two best cells along your row, you subtract their transportation cost. Like now here we have 14 minus 16. So 14 minus 16 gives us 2, always penalty. Even if you get a negative, it's not possible for you to be penalized negatively. So you always ignore the negative. What have we said about penalty calculation? You take the best cell minus the second best cell in terms of the transportation cost per unit. So if you're in agreement, could you kindly give me the penalty for cell number 2, or rather for row number 2? If you're in agreement, kindly give me the penalty for row number 2. The penalty for row number 2, what do we have? Dahir tells me 6, seemingly 6 is correct. So what do we have here? The very best is 18. 18 minus the second best, 24, which gives me 6. Everybody is able to get this. After that, ladies and gentlemen, what about penalty for row 3? For row 3, penalty for row 3, I'm being told it's 2 because it is 14 minus 16. Please go to the columns and do the same. Go to the columns here, column 1. Give me the penalty for column 1. Give me the penalty for column 1. Give me the penalty for column 1. So penalty for column 1, what do we have? For column 1, we have 14 vis-a-vis what here? 20. 14 vis-a-vis 20. Somebody tells me it is 6. 6. From there, we have column 2, where we have 14 vis-a-vis 16. 14 and 16, what do we have, somebody? 14 and 16. This gives me what penalty, somebody here? 2. Thank you very much. Lastly, column 3. Column 3, what is the penalty? The highest, the very best, is 16, followed by 18, which gives me a penalty of what here? A penalty of 2. Now, ladies and gentlemen, remember that we normally use the penalties that we have ascertained to do allocations. To do allocations, we always allocate units to the row, stroke column, with the highest penalty, with the highest what here? With the highest penalty, Allocate units to that row or a column which has the highest penalty. So in this case here, our yardstick, what will be guiding us is the highest penalty, because my aim is to run from that highest penalty. But now I'll run from the highest penalty creatively. First of all, I attack this highest penalty by holding it through, or rather on its horns. I'm not fearing it. So always we go for the highest penalty. That is the condition which you are supposed to be remembering. The condition, always work with the highest penalty. Always work with the highest penalty. Always work with the highest penalty. Allocate units to that row stroke column which has the highest penalty. Now, when you look at the penalties that we have across the board, 6 is the highest. But unfortunately, they happen to be what here? 2 of them. So there is a tie. There is a tie. When there is a tie, what do we do? Whenever there is a tie, what do we do? Cry? No, we can never cry. Whenever there is a tie, we must get a way of resolving this issue. Whenever there is a tie, allocate. Whenever there is a tie, allocate units to the row, stroke column in the tie, stroke column here in the tie, that will consume the highest quantity, that will consume the highest what here. Please write these small notes as we get along. So whenever there is a tie between the highest penalties, the row or a column that will at the end of the day prevail is that row stroke column which will be able to absorb the highest number of units, Now, ladies and gentlemen, listen. When you come to this particular row, this has got 6, a penalty of 6. Among the highest, there are 2 of them, 6 here. Now listen, when you come to this particular row, I would want to know this root will accommodate how many units. So I would want to know, where do I do that assignment? Where do I do that allocation? So this is one of the highest penalties. So I'll walk along the route. And remember, walking along the route means you are a cost minimizer. So as you walk along the route between the 3 cells, the cell that I would prefer, the cell that I would want to work with today is the one that has got the least cost, which is this cell. So I would want to work with this cost, lowest cost, and as such, I would want a good student to tell me how many units are we supposed to put here. How many units are we supposed to put here? Let me call this number 1. Let me call it number 1. How many units am I supposed to put there? Number 1. So we are saying, ladies and gentlemen, remember that along this particular row, right, I'll always endeavor to minimize my cost as I walk along it. So on the cell that has got the lowest cost is this cell here with 18, 24, 30. When I compare the 3, it's 18. So I want to know how many units will be consumed by this cell that have nicknamed 1. When you look at this particular cell very well, there is what we call supply versus demand. You always compare the 2 and always the lower prevails. You compare the 2 and always the lower prevails. Compare the 2 and always the lower prevails. So ladies and gentlemen, listen. So here we are comparing between 30 and what here? 40. We are comparing between the supply and the demand, and the lower prevails. And that is why you are seeing that very many students are telling me that this one here that has got a higher penalty of 6, the root can only accommodate 30. Always. You compare the demand versus the supply, and the effective quantity to be placed in a cell will be the lower. Now listen, come to this other column that has got 6. Remember, you're being guided by the highest what here? Penalty. So this one here that has got 6, ladies and gentlemen, will take me to which cell? Pata potea. Will take me to which cell? Cell which has got which cost? Remember, as I'm walking along my column, as I'm walking along my row, I must always be guided by cost minimization. If I'm not a cost minimizer, I'm not even supposed to be an accountant. Cost minimization, yes. So cost minimization, this takes me to 14, because I'm looking at 14, 30, and 20. So if 14 is the lowest cost, could you kindly tell me this cell here, which I'll call cell number 2. How many units should we put there? 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 How many? I can see from Edward 50. Everybody's saying it's 50 because they're bright, because they've been able to compare this row that has got 80 versus this column that has got 50. And they have been able to remember the fact that we always work with the lower. We always work with the lower. So between 50 and 80, the lower. So listen and listen to me. Cell number 2 can only take what here? 50. Remember their roots. This is root number 1, root number 2. Now remember, in terms of walking along the row and along the column, we'll always endeavor to minimize what here? Cost. But now, between the two roots, listen, between the two roots, we've said whenever there is a tie, ladies and gentlemen, we can only compare the roots in the tie and always quantity-wise. The one that is able to take the highest quantity is the one that will prevail. So in that regard, the one that has got the highest quantity between the two roots is 50. So between the two, I'll come and put 50 here. The one that accommodates the highest number of units here is the one that prevails. So we put 50 there first. Now listen here. When I put any figures inside these cells, we must always meet some total. What am I saying? That whenever we put any entry inside here, we must always meet some total. So we must really analyze to see which total has been met. Like now here, we have met this total of 50 here, meaning that in the future, there is no way these two cells here will ever accommodate any unit, not even one unit. Because if you try putting one unit here, ladies and gentlemen, automatically will surpass these 50. So anytime you do an entry, an allocation of quantity in this particular big table, always try to study and tell us which quantity has been met, total quantity has been met. Like now here we have met this total quantities capacity. And once we have done that, if there are any cells along here which are empty, we are supposed to block them. We are supposed to block them like that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, listen. This particular column, we shall never make reference to it in the future because it is fully filled up. So if it is fully filled up, what you're supposed to do is to go through it and cancel its penalty. Any cell, any column or row that you meet its total parameter, its penalty must be cancelled. Go along that column and cancel that penalty. Now, ladies and gentlemen, listen. When you cancel a penalty, there is a rule. Anytime you cancel a penalty, whenever you cancel a penalty, there is a rule which is very important. Whenever we cancel a penalty, the rule on cancellation of a penalty, whenever we cancel a penalty, always recalculate penalties for the entire table afresh. I'm repeating again, that whenever you cancel a penalty, recalculate penalties for the entire table afresh. So anytime you cancel a penalty, remember to recalculate. Remember to recalculate penalties afresh. Remember to recalculate penalties afresh. So I'm being reminded that it's prayer time. So prayer for how many minutes, Katra? How many minutes, Katra prayers? Katra nataka dakika ngapi? Dakika 10. So ni mbio jameni, ni mbio jameni. Wala ambao muendi kuomba, it's important that we all of us get to pray. Very important, yes. It's 6:27. We come back at 6:37 and then it continues to the end. So ladies and gentlemen, here we are, we continue. Here we are, we continue. So we've said, here we have cancelled a penalty. When we cancel a penalty, we must recalculate new penalties for the entire table afresh. Fortunately, calculating a penalty is not a big deal. Like if you tell me to calculate a penalty for you for this particular column, how do I go about it? I'll always work with the very best cell. In this column, the very best cell is 14, followed by 16. So get the difference between the best and second best. So 14 minus 16, that gives me 2. Remember, we said we assume that all penalties are positive. Disregard any negative. So here we have 2. How about this? Here now, listen here. Remember, you never did any allocation. You never did any allocation there. No allocation was done there. So still this cell is available. So the very best cell here, ladies and gentlemen, along this column is 16. 16 followed by 18. So the difference, this minus this, gives me 2. And there is no good reason for me to cancel this 2 to write another 2. No. So in this case here, we have the 2 still remaining there, 2 like that. Now come to this other angle here, the row. The row, remember that anytime they want us to compute a penalty, we only work with eligible cells, eligibility test. If you look at here now, we have 3 cells, right? But you see this cell is blocked. It's not eligible for taking up units in the future. So you can't use it to calculate a penalty. So therefore, the only 2 cells we shall use to compute our penalty are these one here being the best, followed by this. So 14 minus 16, that still gives me 2. Here we have the very best, which is 18. 18 minus 24. Somebody give me this. 18 minus 24, that gives me still what here? 6. And then now we have here 16. Please remember this cell is already filled. It's not a nice cell for us to use to compute a penalty. So now we have 16 vis-a-vis what here? 24. So 16 minus 24 gives me what figure? Somebody here. 16 minus 24. Somebody give me that figure. What is 16 minus 24? I'm being told it's 8. So here, come and just knock this off once, and then you write 8 by the side. You write 8 by the side. Ladies and gentlemen, I happen to be having a fresh pool of penalties. I have new penalties. So I'll always endeavor to work with the highest penalty. So in this particular case, among us the 4, are they 4 or 6? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Among us the 5 penalties that you have, which one is the highest? Which one is the highest among the 5 penalties here that we have? Which one is the highest? Which one is the highest? Somebody tells me it's 8. Fine. Unfortunately, this time around, ladies and gentlemen, we do not have a tie. We only have 1 8, which is the highest. So when there's no tie, things become very easy for me because my role will be to walk along the path. My role will be to walk along this row and go for the best cost cell. So cost-wise, when I walk here, remember I can't make reference to this cell. This was taken a long time ago. So the best cell cost-wise is this one here that has got what here? 16. 16. Can somebody tell me tonight, how many units do you think will this particular cell take up? How many units will it take? Somebody help me. How many units will it take? Somebody help me. Dahiri says 30. How many? Edward says 30. Everybody seems to say 30. These are bright students. What they have done is to compare the row total vis-a-vis the column total. Listen, row-wise, I'm able to see the 80. But you see out of the 80, 50 have been taken up. So meaning that we are working with balancing figures. We are working with balancing figures along the row. What figure do we need to put there to balance? So along the row, what figure do we need to put here to balance? So along the row, a figure that we need to balance this 80 is 30. So row-wise, moving this way, we need to slot 30 here. How about column-wise? Column-wise, assuming we don't put anything because you're still comparing, column-wise, we need 110. Remember, we said you compare row total column total, taking into consideration the balancing figures. And then always work with, in terms of balancing figures, we always work with the smaller. In terms of balancing figures, always work with the small. It's only in the tie where we go for the highest quantity to be accommodated route. So ladies and gentlemen, listen. Here we have said row wise 30, column wise 110. So 30 prevails. So we shall put 30 here. Now let me ask you a question. After putting that 30 there, could you kindly advise me, is there any total we have met by placing that 30 there? Because every time you insert a quantity there, there must be a total to be met. There is no way you can ever insert a quantity without meeting some total. Is there any total we have been able to meet? Is there any total we have been able to meet? Oh, yes. By putting this 30, we were able to meet this total of what here? 80. Row CS has been met. So whenever you meet a total of a particular row or a column, like now here we have met a total of 80, this total of 80, it means that any empty cell along that row whose total we have met has to be blocked. Any empty cell along the row whose total we have met here has to be blocked as a sign that it shall never accept units in the future. It shall never accept units in the future. Meaning, ladies and gentlemen, that this particular row is fully exhausted. And if it is fully exhausted, what do? We'll come and cancel it. You cancel. If it's fully exhausted, you cancel. If it's fully exhausted, you cancel. Remember the rule of cancellation of penalties. Cancel a penalty, recalculate penalties for the entire table afresh. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been able to cancel this. Let's calculate afresh. Remember, this was a long time ago canceled. So column number 2, who can give me the new penalty for column number 2? Please give me the new penalty for column number 2. For column number 2, who is able to give me this new penalty for column number 2? Remember, when you're getting a penalty, you will basically come and take the best cell is 14, followed by what here, somebody? 24. So 14 and 24, if you subtract, what are we getting here, somebody? We are getting 10. And then come to this particular column 3. So column 3, what do we have? 16 and 18. 16 and 18, that gives me what penalty, somebody? 2. So there is no good reason for me to cancel that. Still 2. Come here and check whether there is any which is changing. 14 and 16, that gives me 2. 24 and 18, that gives me 6. So I happen to be having a fresh round of what here? Penalties. What do I do with these penalties? Very easy. Always you will be guided by the highest penalty. Highest penalty happens to be the 10. It's a column penalty. Walk along the column and do the allocation of units for us. Walk along the column, which has the highest penalty. When you walk along the column that has got the highest penalty, this 10 here, it takes me to the very best cell. The best cell, I'm walking here. The very best cell is the one that has got the lowest cost. So the one that has got the lowest cost is this one here with 14. So then how many units will it take here? Ladies and gentlemen, row-wise is supposed to be 90. Row-wise is supposed to be 90. How about column-wise, this cell? Column-wise, I would have comfortably placed 110. But you see, there is a 30. So there is the concept of balancing. What do I need to put here to balance this total? It will be 110 minus 30. 110 minus 30, that gives me what here? Somebody 80. That gives me 80, thank you. So then I'm comparing between placing here 90 and 80. Remember, in terms of balancing figures, the lower balancing figure is always the lower that prevails. Quantity-wise, balancing figure, it is always the lower that prevails. And as such, we shall come and place what there? 80. We shall come and place 80 there. Once I place 80 there, I must use the totality rule. Is there any total that you have been able to meet by placing that 80 there? Oh, yes. We've been able to meet, ladies and gentlemen, these 110. And then when you walk along the column, you'll be able to see along the column, if there is any empty cell along a column whose total you have met, these has to be blocked. And if it has been blocked, it means that this full column here has been exhausted. We shall never make reference to it in the future. And really to be able to demonstrate that, we need to cancel the penalty. And remember, that once you cancel a penalty, you cease, or rather you have to calculate new penalties afresh. When you cancel a penalty, you have to recalculate new penalties afresh. So come here, we have 16 and 18. 16 and 18, that gives me what here? 2. That gives me 2. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here there is a problem now. What is the problem? That for us to be able to compute a penalty, we need how many empty cells? 2. When you look at this, we don't have a partner for these. Row number 1, you need 2 cells. The 2 which are here are already taken up. So here we have hit a plateau. We have hit the dead end of calculating penalties. Whenever you reach a situation where you have a row or a column with a single empty cell, one empty cell, and you need 2 to be able to compute penalties, then you stop the exercise of computing penalties there and then. So when you stop like that, ladies and gentlemen, it means that now we have hit that particular level where we only take balancing figures. For purposes of finishing our question, now we have hit that particular situation where we can no longer compute penalties, and as such, we shall come here and balance our entire table. So while balancing, remember we have got 2 cells here. I can't start with the 18, even if we are speaking about balancing. We have to be cost sensitive. So cost sensitivity, this takes me to this cheapest cell here. So somebody, how many units do I place here to be able to really meet the entire table? How many? When you look at row-wise, balancing figure is 10 because there is this 80. When I look at column-wise, balancing figure, there is nothing to be deducted here from the total. Balancing figure here downward will be 40. Balancing figures, we always work with the smaller. And as such, I'll put 10 there. So when I place that 10 there, ladies and gentlemen, I can see I've already met this. Remember now there is even nothing much really to talk about, to care about. It's about balancing, and I was having 2 cells. Here I've been able to place a quantity. Now the very last one is the most sensitive one, which will be able to guide us and tell us whether we are correct or wrong. This last one, now whatever quantity you put here should be able to agree row-wise and column-wise. How many units do we place here? How many units do we place there? Somebody talk to us. How many units do we place there? Lokai tells me 30. So when you look at row-wise, you're right, 30, even column-wise, 30 because of 40 minus 10. So 30 like that. So ladies and gentlemen, we've been able to finish allocation of units to our transportation table cells. And now once you do that, you need to straight away rise up, go to another different step, the step of checking for degeneracy. So come here and check for degeneracy. Come here and check for degeneracy. So mention there, check for degeneracy. Check for degeneracy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, listen and listen to me very well. If you want me to check for degeneracy, there are 2 things that I'll always remember. 2 things that I will always remember while checking for degeneracy. Number 1, I have to count all the filled cells. Then I'll be able to explain to you what degeneracy means. So you count the number of filled cells. Please count them for us. Number of filled cells. How many cells do we have here that are filled up in our table? Number of units or other cells with the units, like this has a unit. This has got units. So we have 1, 2, 1, 2. Don't count the supply and the demand. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see when somebody has already gotten that. Number of filled cells, they are telling me they are 5. Number of filled cells, they are telling me they are 5. Please come and compare this with some statistic, very important statistic, R plus C minus 1. R plus C minus 1. R plus C minus 1. R stands for rows. Rows plus columns minus 1. Rows plus columns minus 1. So rows, how many do we have? Rows means sources. 1, 2, 3. Don't count the demand. Rows means, ladies and gentlemen, rows, we have 3. Columns, we have got how many? 1, 2, 3. Columns are 3. So 3 plus 3 minus 1, as somebody there, Edward is telling me, is 5. 5. So ladies and gentlemen, listen. When they want me to give them the degree of degeneracy, what I'll do, I'll come and give them this difference. This difference is what we shall be calling the department, or rather the degree of degeneracy. Somebody may confuse that for Department of Defense. So DOD stands for degree of degeneracy. So this degree of degeneracy, I'll take 5, this one, minus this 5. So 5 minus 5 gives me 0. 5 minus 5 gives me 0. 5 minus 5 gives me 0. Ladies and gentlemen, listen. Listen. Degeneracy is not a good thing. Any solution that is degenerate, any table that is degenerate, if you get a table that is degenerate, it means that that table doesn't have a solution. If you get any table that has got some degree, whichever degree of degeneracy, even if it's 1, 2, 3, doesn't matter. So long as a problem is degenerate, it has got some degree of degeneracy, then we stop there. We can't continue. Fortunately, here we are lucky. Why am I saying we are lucky? Because the degree of degeneracy here is 0, meaning that the table that we have here is not degenerate. So you mentioned there, because of this 0, because DOD is 0, this is very okay for us. Very okay for us. Why? Because simply our table is not degenerate. So degeneracy means without a solution. I'm repeating again, degeneracy means no solution. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are at home. Now that we have realized that we have a solution for our thing, we shall go to the last step. The last step is the one of computing shadow prices. The last step, come and compute shadow prices for us. Last step, come and compute shadow prices for us. Remember, shadow prices use stepping stone method. Use stepping stone method. Use stepping stone method, which is SSM. Use stepping stone method, which is SSM. And if you recall, this stepping stone method, which is our SSM, is also known as the method of loops, also known as the loops method. The loops method. It's also known as the loops The loops method. It's also known as the loops method. It's also known as the loops method. It's also known as the loops method. So you're going to be drawing loops. But remember, as we move around our loops, loops can only bend in a cell with units. Tell us there, note and B, that loops can only bend. Loops can only bend in a cell with units. Units are the ones we are calling what here? Stones. Loops can only bend in a cell with units. Loops can only bend in a cell with units. Loops can only bend in a cell with units. Great. Once I've got these ideas, ladies and gentlemen, then I should be able, I hope they're okay, they're written up to there. I hope they've been able to write up to there. And if that is the case, then I should be able to rub. Great. So I'm learning something great here that, ladies and gentlemen, my loop here can only bend in a cell with units. So what we're going to do is to come and have a list of all the empty cells. We normally compute shadow prices for empty cells. We normally compute shadow prices for empty cells. So we normally compute shadow prices for empty cells. So please give us a list. Give us a list of all the empty cells that you have. Give us a list of all the empty cells that you have. Empty cells. Is there anybody who is able to see who can define empty cells for us here. Like the first one is an empty cell. So we have here AW1 or FA, whichever, AW1. From there, I can see the other one, which is empty, is BW2, W1, I mean, BW1. I'm just trying to give you a list of all those cells that are empty. So BW1, also this one here, BW2, and then lastly, we have here CW3. Lastly, we have C, and even write it here, CW3. CW3. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would want to see whether there is any student who will be able to remember how we were making these loops. How we were making these loops. How are we making these loops? Great. So like if you tell me to start from here, from this AW1, the first empty cell, remember I can only go horizontal and what here, vertical. There is nothing like using diagonal lines. So horizontally, if you tell me to go horizontally, of course I can't come this way. If I come this way, I'll disappear just like the Malaysian plane, which was never found at all. Disappears completely. So when you tell me to move horizontally, I can only go all the way up to where I'm seeing 80. I can only go all the way up to where I'm seeing 80. So this is a cell with stones, a cell with units. So if it has got units, then I can stop there, step on it, and bend, just like a soldier. You can only, in this case here, place your leg firmly on a strong ground. Like now, these are ground with stone. And then now, ladies and gentlemen, given that I've gotten a stone here, I can consider bending. Of course, bending now, it means I use a vertical line. I can't go up. It means I go down. And if I go down, ladies and gentlemen, there is no way I can stop on this empty cell, because you can never make a bend on an empty cell. Bending only happens in a cell with stones. So from here, ladies and gentlemen, what I expect you to do is to go down like this. Hit there where we have 30. So you're skipping this. Where am I skipping it? Because it doesn't have stones. So here I can see stones. Now I'm obliged to do what? To bend. But of course I can't bend horizontally. I can't go there. If I go this side, I will only go to my, or I'll only disappear completely because I'm not allowed to bend in the supply. So here if it's bending, I can only bend towards a stone, towards this 50. And once I bend towards this 50, now nimeona mwanya ya kurudi straight away to the beginning. Nimeona mwanya ya kurudi straight away to the beginning up there. To the beginning up there. So now I've completed my loop. I've been able to get back to where I started from. So remember, the first cell here in the corner has to be a plus. These are cells, they keep on alternating minus. Where you are seeing a corner, there are 4. So plus, minus, plus. Here we have a minus like that. So ladies and gentlemen, listen. What I will do for me to be able to get my shadow price for this AW1, I'll start right out with my first sign. So what I do is to take the sign itself with the transportation cost. So I'll say plus 20. The next cell I can see is minus 14. Plus, the next cell I'm able to see that has got a sign is this. So plus 16. Minus here 14. Kwisha maneno, nipatie answer jameni. Kwisha maneno, nipatie answer jameni. From there, I'll be able to guide you accordingly. So Nancy anasema kwamba ni 8. Now, I would want to give you some little trouble. I know you haven't followed at all. But could you kindly try giving me the shadow price of BW1? I'll give you a present. BW1, I'll give you a present. So I'm waiting to see whether there is any student who has really picked this concept by giving us the shadow price of BW1. Just try. Ukiona amenyamaza hivyo ni disaster, disaster, disaster. Tricky but 34. Melissa tells me 14. Christine Kariuki, I like the democracy. This is the kind of democracy we like. Unakuwa na wengine ambao ni dynasty, wengine ni mahasla. Na tunaishi vizuri wote pamoja. Wanasema figures tofauti. But I'm yet to get answers from the other students. I mean, what have you gotten? What have you gotten? Faith says 8. Faith says 8. One of the other students, Kiprotich says 8. This 8 is gaining traction. Seemingly, it could be the correct answer. Katra has even gone ahead and given us the formula. Let me do it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, listen. It is BW1. It is BW1. BW1. Let's see. Allow me to rub this. Wish I could get a blue pen. Great. So it is BW1. So this BW1, how will we move? Very nice. Very nice. The moment I understand this, then I would have understood the entire thing on shadow pricing. So horizontally, I'll go straight away up to 30 because I can't step in between there. So from 30, now, of course, I've hit a dead end. I can't continue. Remember, this is where I've begun from. So I'm forced to bend. So where do I bend to? I can't bend down because if I do that, I'll disappear permanently. So it means I bend up. So I go to 10. There again, I've hit a dead end. It means I can only go to 80. I can't go this way. I go to 80. So from 80, I can't continue. I'll have to bend. So bending means straight away, I go to 30. Right? From 30, of course, I'm trying to find my way back. I can't bend. I'll always be pulled by stones. Here there is a hot stone calling me, 50. And then I'll be able to go back like that. Nobody said that we must have a square. No. So remember, this will be plus. We must always start with the plus. So plus 30. So we have here plus 30, plus 30, plus 30. The next corner after 30 is this one here, which I'll talk of minus 18. We're working with CIJs. So minus 18 plus. The cell signs must keep on alternating. After this, we went here. So plus 16 minus. The next corner will be minus 14. The next one will be plus. The next corner after this is here. So plus 16 minus. The last corner here is 14 just before we ventured back. Minus 14. Hebu tupatie answer tuone itakuja ngapi. Tupatie answer tuone itakuja ngapi oye. Tupatie answer tuone itakuja ngapi oye. Katra says 16. So remember, as we get shadow prices, we are only working with corners. Corners that helped us bend. So what figures do we have here? Somebody is saying 816. I doubt that. 16. I want to believe I wanted to say 16 years. So this is 16. So could you kindly now get for me this and this one, bila wasiwasi. Get for me those two, bila wasiwasi. Get for me those two, bila wasiwasi. BW2. Shadow price of BW2, I've only seen 2 students who have responded. For instance, I haven't heard from Benjamin Munyoki. Liz Wandi, I've not heard from you. Muhammad. Edward 8. Timothy Karuti, I've not heard from you. Husna. Sio kitu ngumu, jaribu tuone. Samuel J tells me 8. So what do we have here for BW2? BW2, ladies and gentlemen, for BW2, we have BW2. Here, for BW2, this is quite an easy one, because for BW2, I'm surrounded with stones. The stones which will be pulling me towards them are quite close by, because from here, I'll come to this cell. From here, I'll go there. I'll be pulled by this 80, and then I come back. So we start with the plus here. So it'll be plus the CIJ, so plus 24. The next cell where the bend here is this one here, which is now minus, because the signs must keep on alternating. So minus 18, plus 16, minus 14. And I'm having so many students who are giving me the answer to be what here? To be 8. So many of them are telling me that the answer is 8. How about CW3? CW3. So could you kindly help me? CW3, the last one. CW3, the last one. What do we have there? Edward already has gotten an answer, 6. So for CW3, ladies and gentlemen, I can see that here is saying there is floating. This is a very simple thing, the simplest of them all. Very simple thing. Let me rub this. Okay, so we are looking at CW3. CW3. So CW3, where are we? Here. Here. So what you want to do is to constitute a loop. And how do we constitute this loop? Very easy. You move horizontally and what here? Vertically, in a way that you will be able to step on stones. The method itself is called stepping stone method. Stepping stone method. It's called a stepping stone method. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me here. If it's horizontal where I can see a stone here, I can see quantity here. So here I'll move up to 30. So from there I don't have to continue. Once I've seen a stone, I'll always consider bending. So here I want to bend vertically. Vertically, of course, I can't go down. I am seeing a stone up there pulling me. I can't stop here because here is an empty cell. So I can see a stone pulling me up. I'll go all the way to 80. So from there, what do? I want to bend because already I've hit a dead end upwards. So bending, I can't go this way because if I try to go this way, I'll disappear completely. There is no stone to step on to bend horizontally that way. So it means if it's horizontal, it has to be this 10. And of course, the moment I've seen this 10, now I have to go down at once because I'll have closed the loop. The essence is to start and ensure that you close the loop. You start and you ensure that you close the loop. So ladies and gentlemen, if that is agreeable, I would want us to come and now fix these things for CW3. So CW3. So this CW3, what do we have here? We start from our empty cell. Our empty cell here has to be positive. Remember, we keep on changing as per the corners. So this will be negative, this will be positive, this will be negative. The corners, we have only 4 corners and therefore 4 signs. So we have here positive what here? 24. Even if you move clockwise or anti-clockwise, you'll get the same answers. The next one is this one here with minus the small cell value. So minus 16. The next cell here is plus what? Plus 14. From there, we have minus what here? Minus 16. So could you kindly give us an answer? You can't use this because you don't have a corner. You only use cells with a corner. You only make use of cells with a corner. Please help me. What figure do we have? Pata potea. Pata potea. So I'm being given a figure of what here? 6. 6. I'm being given a figure of 6. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's make some observation there. That all the shadow prices are a positive. All the shadow prices are a positive, and therefore we have an optimal solution. All the shadow prices are positive, and therefore we have an optimal solution. Remember, our solution can only be optimal when the shadow prices are positive. So therefore, our solution is what here? The best. Our solution is optimal. Remember, whenever you use VAM and use it correctly, the first table you get will always be optimal. There are no iterations to be made here. The first table you get will always be optimal. You can't get a negative shadow price. When you use VAM very well, the first table you get will be what here? Will be optimal. Will be optimal. And therefore, the total transportation cost, give us there, the total transportation cost will be equal to the total transportation cost. Therefore, the total transportation cost. The total transportation cost will be equal to what here? I've taken how many units here? I have A to W2. A to W2, I took 80 units. And I know that each unit is costing me 14. Plus, we've taken 10 units to this cell. So plus 10, 10 times 16. Plus Just try to get all the quantities. We have 30 times 18. 30 times the cost per unit, which is 18, plus 50 times 14, plus 30 plus 30 times 16. Come and give us a figure. Give us a figure. Give us a figure. So Edward gives us a figure of 3,000. Edward gives us a figure of what here? 3,000. So ladies and gentlemen, I think the very best thing that I need to do, fortunately today I've been able to record this particular class. Instead of repeating these things half and half like that, I should share with you the video. I share with you the video, you have a look at it, and then we compare notes later.